Come with me today to review the Odyssey, the book, and the movie by Christopher Nolan.
Hello everybody, welcome to Fanfare. Appreciate making it to the channel. If you could just do me a small favor, if you haven't yet subscribed, can you just go down below and please subscribe? It'd make a world of difference to me. I can then produce a little bit more volume of videos, give me a bit more time to research and just give a little bit more content. I would appreciate that. If you don't subscribe, please at least provide me some commentary, pro or con. Doesn't matter to me. I appreciate both. I will read and respond to all of them. It's a way to me to learn and interact. I know there's lots I can learn. So today I really didn't want to do a video about this recent film by Christopher Nolan, The Odyssey. There's a ton of criticism out there. There's no short of it on the internet. It abounds. And I mean, this started happening way before the movie was released. There was a bunch of sort of actor picks and such that sort of blew up the internet. It's still blowing up. It still hasn't calmed down. Like I said, I really didn't want to do a video on this, but The Odyssey is dear to my heart. I've read it twice with the Iliad, which is the one prior to the Odyssey. Again, authored by supposedly Homer. We're not sure who Homer is. Not going to get into that business. You can research that on your own. But let's go with it being produced by Homer. So again, I like Christopher Nolan. I think he's a good producer, director, and I just question if this adaptation of Homer is spot on. I mean, I've seen it, and I don't know. I'm on the fence. I'm not going to criticize everything about the film. I think it's a good film, and if anything, it's probably enlightened people to go and seek out Homer and the Odyssey. So, you know, let's go with that part at least. There's some benefit to that. Outside of that, you know, like I said, the movie's taken a lot of criticism, especially from Emily Wilson, who is noted for her 2017 English translation of the Odyssey. And it's the translation that Nolan sort of got inspired by, and especially sort of motivational lines in her book. The one particular, Tell Me About a Complicated Man. It really is sort of a launching pad for Nolan. It's definitely a key statement in her book. Should have been a key go-to for Nolan, as Odysseus is a very complicated man. And in the movie, he has really eviscerated Odysseus in terms of complications. If anything, I'll get into a little bit more, he sort of is deflated Odysseus. So, I don't know. Well, I think everyone has their own opinion on this. If you've read the book, if you've you know, if you're an aficionado of the classics, you might get a little annoyed by this. Just one sec here. Got to turn something off. Yeah, so this may annoy you because it's, you know, it's not a true to form in terms of the actual original Odyssey in Homer. Now, there has been translations of all sorts, so it's not like it's been never changed. I mean, and Nolan, you know, has produced a lot of changes, but there's some that are monumental. They're not like just subtle, but just huge. So it gives you pause for sure if you've read this book. So again, he's given us an epic. I guess Hollywood doesn't produce these any longer or attempt to produce these types of films because they are, you know, very expensive. And again, I don't think this is a genuine epic for sure because of what I'll discuss a little bit more. It's not a superhero movie, which is good. It's not a franchise. It's not a remake of something that was already a blockbuster. But it's Homer, one of the oldest stories in Western literature. And obviously the Odyssey, and again, I'm not going to do the Iliad here, but he does do the Iliad as well. And I have to admit, something about this movie. You know, it's an enjoyable movie. You got to give a little bit of credit to the movie. I mean, it's photography is beautiful. It's kind of enormous in its structure. I think the performances are okay based on sort of the script. If that's what they've been given, yeah, the performances are good. And the action is spectacular, and there's even moments when, you know, you're pretty inspired. So, I mean, that's what a movie's supposed to be doing, right? It's supposed to give you sort of inspiration. That's why you go to the theater. But I had one nagging thought, and that's the thought because, and it became stronger. Is this a good Christopher Nolan movie? But is it a great Odyssey? I don't know. And that's a very different question of the two. You know, it is. I'd say it's a good Christopher Nolan movie. It's kind of what he's done with other heroes and such. But I don't know if he hit the mark on the Odyssey. It's quite. I don't know. It's empty a little bit there. So I'll talk about it a little bit more. And let me just talk about the complicated man. As I mentioned, Christopher Nolan took his inspiration from Emily Wilson's translation of the Odyssey. But if he took inspiration from that adaptation by Emily Wilson, why did he deviate so much in his adaptation? That's really a big question for me. 'Cause she doesn't deviate the way Nolan does. Her book is sort of true to force and just sort of down the middle. Some changes here and there for sure, but I don't know what's with Nolan. I don't know what happened here, but you know, that one phrase, "tell me about a complicated man," is a fascinating way to introduce Odysseus, because Odysseus is complicated. You know, he's a warrior. You'll see he's a husband, a father, a king, but also he's a liar. He's a phenomenal strategist. He's an excellent manipulator, which we'll see with the Cyclops, which lacks in Nolan's movie. And quite frankly, sometimes he's quite an unpleasant man. He can be courageous and cowardly, loyal, and unfaithful, for sure. We see that throughout the Odyssey in sort of the encounters of some of the women he had with in his journeys back to his wife. He can be extraordinarily intelligent, especially with the Trojan horse, and again back to the Cyclops. And he can be extraordinarily foolish, which we see with Poseidon, and again, the wrath he brings because of what he did to the Cyclops. But we don't see that totally in Nolan's film, because the gods are devoid in his film. They sort of take a back role, not even really there. And, you know, he's not an Achilles, he's not a Superman. He doesn't simply win because he's the strongest man in the room. He wins because he figures out how to survive the room. That's the beauty of Odysseus. He's quite multi-complex, and in that complexity, he's gained a lot of transferable traits to the encounters he has with the many different aspects in the translation of Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, not the movie. Now, there is aspects in the movie, again, I like about sort of the character building, but not all of it for sure. It's lacking in a lot of areas. In Emily Wilson's review, she describes Nolan's script and the writing abysmal, and she would be ashamed to have written any part of this script. That's a pretty extraordinary criticism, since Nolan praised her. It's kind of a slap in the face. But Nolan has taken one of literature's most complicated heroes and made him much simpler. If you read the book, see the movie, you'll see there is definitely a stark difference in the two characters. But I would not go as far as saying Wilson does really get the movie too much. She's coming from this sort of academic, scholarly way of thinking, and I think if we're just sort of the middle of the road reader, I think sure it's going to upset us with some of the stuff that's missed, but I don't think we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater the way she's doing. So, but I think she's definitely identified some genuine problems for sure. So, so there is 4 translations outside of hers. There's Robert Fagles in 1996, Robert Fitzgerald, Samuel Butler, and Richard Lattimore. And in this section, it's the man of many twists. This is Odysseus, right? He's got this Greek word associated with Odysseus, which is polytropos. And this word can morph into a variety of meanings. From Emily Wilson's version, in terms of the complicated man, and, Fagles, he calls it the man twists and turns. Fitzgerald calls it the man skilled in all ways of contending. Butler's has it as the ingenious hero, and Lattimore, the man of twists and turns. So everybody describes Odysseus in a different manner in terms of his complication. He is, like I said, very complicated, and if you've read the book, you'll definitely see how complicated this man is. So, a man of many turns, a man who can adapt, a man who can, changes his approach depending on the situation, and that's exactly what makes him different from a controversial action hero. Again, we got to think about the Cyclops when we're talking about this, what he does to the Cyclops. In Nolan's movie, the Cyclops is obviously, he looks very menacing, well done in terms of that. But he is not duped like Odysseus dupes him in the book, in Homer's book. In the book, the Cyclops, he's menacing and definitely, a challenge for the Odysseus and his crew. They do have a fire and dinner and such with the Cyclops in the book. And when he gets drunk and he falls asleep, Odysseus and his men stab him in his one eye, obviously. He yells out, screaming in pain, and all the other Cyclops in the area come to his aid. And I must mention that Odysseus' men, this Cyclops who they meet is called Polyphemus. And he, I believe, was a son of Poseidon, and I'll get to that in a sec. But again, they stab him in the eye while he's sleeping. He wakes up in a torrent of anger, yelling and screaming. But when Polyphemus first meets Odysseus, he asks him his name. And as cunning as Odysseus is, he says, "My name is nobody." And here it's where it's critical in terms of the trickery, the strategy that comes out of Odysseus. You have the Cyclops waking up in pain, and then the other Cyclops come, as I said. They ask what's going on. Are you okay? And he says, "Nobody is hurting me. Nobody is hurting me." This is comical. Because they hear nobody's hurting me, they leave. In the book, Odysseus and his men crawl under the sheep that the Cyclops Polyphemus has as his sheep herd, and they escape underneath the bellies of these sheep off to the boat. So, he seemed like a seemingly unbeatable opponent, and he doesn't overpower Polyphemus, Odysseus. It's his, by using his strategy, he lied to him. And he tells, like I said, Polyphemus he's nobody. It's brilliant. And, the Cyclops leave, and they leave Polyphemus to his own doing. And here's where Odysseus wins, because he understands the psychology of his enemy. He weaponizes language. He weaponizes deception. He turns the Cyclops on assumptions against him. That's not simply an action sequence. That's character development that Nolan missed in his movie. Because in the movie, all they do is they jostle around. There's no mention of nobody. They just encounter the Cyclops. And again, they get away from the Cyclops. There's some acrimony between the two camps, but nothing to this beautiful level the way it is in Homer, in the Odyssey. And that's where Nolan's version left me disappointed. So, because when he removes something fundamental, you make a change like this, it's no longer about a subtle difference. This is a massive difference. It's not even the original Odyssey now. It's Nolan's Odyssey, which is not good any longer. It loses its tenor, its viability. So, he didn't need to do this. You haven't simply, like I said, removed a famous scene from Homer. You've ruined the central character, Odysseus. So, it's terrible that we're not seeing the intelligence, the deception, the humor, the trickery, the ability to survive through just mind games. And suddenly Odysseus begins to feel less, like I said, like Homer's Odysseus. It's terrible. And more and more, he looks like a traumatized version of a modern action hero. So the next area I just wanted to sort of look at is this whole idea of Emily Wilson coining the movie and the actor Matt Damon as another sequel to the Jason Bourne series. She saw this as a problem. And maybe that isn't surprising, because who better to play the modern action role than Matt Dillon? I like Matt Dillon, but he definitely should not have been Odysseus. There's something to be said if they had picked just a new face. So yes, Matt Damon, great actor. He brought a lot to the role. He is one of these actors that do these action movies. That's one of the stalwarts like Tom Cruise and such. Really great actors. But again, she's sort of right. I've never seen the series of Jason Bourne, but it does leave you with that tainted feeling that all you're seeing is a new Jason Bourne movie. And why is he in armor-clad uniform from 3,000 years ago, which is another criticism the movie got in terms of its costuming, that the armor was wrong. But I'm not going to get to that pettiness right now. But again, it would have been novel if we had a brand new face here. But probably, I think, when these directors are doing individuals of this capacity, this sort of notoriety, like an Odysseus or Abraham Lincoln or a Gandhi or some figure that is like larger than life, wouldn't it be better if we just employed first person filming, where we just see the hands, we see the feet, maybe we'll see them in repose in sort of a noir kind of idea where it's darkened out. I don't need to see their face. I don't want to see it, if anything. And in this first person version, we could just see through their eyes the environment around us. That would have been great if they could have done Odysseus from that perspective and just leave it to the viewer's imagination what he looks like. I don't need to see Matt Damon. And so I kind of go with Emily Wilson here. It was unnecessary because in this instance, you see a man that's been through hell because you're basing it on the other movies. A man haunted by violence, a man who doesn't want to be what he's become, a man carrying psychological burden from his from the past. And, and Nolan's Odysseus feels much closer to the character of Jason Bourne than Homer's version. Odysseus is defined by trauma, by war, by guilt, by the psychological consequences of what he has done. And to be fair, that's an interesting interpretation. In fact, it's a very Nolan interpretation. That's how this movie's come out. We don't see that vigorous Odysseus as we see in the Odyssey, who's full of energy, full of what's my next battle I'm going to take on. Whereas here he's sort of a deflated individual. Definitely Nolan's made a simpler Odysseus. And maybe that's for the audience, I don't know. But, it goes along with sort of if you've seen Bruce Wayne, Leonard Shelby, Robert Englund, and Oppenheimer, these are all grounded superheroes. Batman, again, he's a Dark Knight kind of guy. Leonard Shelby is protagonist. Short-term memory, loss of neo-noir thriller, Memento, that's what he's in. The Decisive 19th Century, Magician, and the rivalry drama of The Prestige in 2006. And obviously Oppenheimer. He plays this theoretical physicist, the father atomic bomb. All these guys are tormented, and that's sort of what he's done with Odysseus in his movie. Very unfortunate. And again, I'm going to go with Emily Wilson on this. He could have done a better job on picking someone else other than this. Even a new face would have been better. Not Matt Damon. It's really bad. Really bad. So yeah, the other areas I sort of want to talk about is Penelope. Now, she's one of the main thread lines in the Odyssey, and and the lengths Odysseus would take to get home to reunite with her is epic in the book. It's epic in the movie too, but not quite the same way as the book. It could have been larger than life in the movie as well. Unfortunately, Nolan made a big mistake on not showcasing Penelope to the overall central story of the movie. She's definitely deflated as well, just like Odysseus has become. Because if you only think of the Odyssey as a story of Odysseus, well, then you miss half of it. Penelope is not placed at the center of the story. This is not a simple woman waiting at the home. She's fighting her own battle. She's got an absent husband, a kingdom to manage, a son who's grown up without her father, a house full of suitors trying to take her hand in marriage, and constant political threats. And she survives all of this by what she does, like any strong woman. She uses her intelligence, her great deception. She makes promises she doesn't intend to keep. She creates delays, and she plays the game. In other words, Penelope is an Odysseus-like character. That's why they're probably the yin and yang of each other. In the book, for sure. Don't see it in the movie. Again, she's been deflated as part of the greater part of this story. And that's missing for the audience. They're not going to see this strong matriarch, which they should be. So, that's one of the greatest ideas of Homer's poems, is being able to carve out these individuals with amazing, amazing traits. This husband survives the outside world through cunning. The wife survives the inside world through cunning. They are separated by thousands of miles, but they are fighting essentially the same battle. And then Homer gives us the famous marriage bed test. When Odysseus finally returns to Penelope, She doesn't throw herself onto him. There's a test. And the test involves something only the real Odysseus would know. Their bed. The bed cannot be moved because Odysseus built it around a living olive tree. It's a beautiful moment because after 20 years, recognition comes through intelligence, not simply emotion. And that's what makes Penelope and Odysseus such an extraordinary pair. The question I have while watching Nolan's film was, could Penelope have been given more? Because Anne Hathaway gives us a strong performance, but Homer's Penelope is arguably one of the most intelligent people in the entire story, and she was missed on this by Nolan. And she deserves to be more than simply an emotional distantation of the Odysseus. She needs to be more. She needs to be this powerhouse as reflected in the Odyssey. So other areas that sort of have me concerned are, where are the gods in this movie? In the book, when the Cyclops is stabbed in his eye and that whole kerfuffle with the nobody, that's not in the book, in the movie. Poseidon finds out about this, about what has happened to his beloved son, the Cyclops, and he rains wrath on Odysseus' ship and basically annihilates everybody because of what he did to this Cyclops son. And this is an enormous change, what Nolan's done to the whole movie. All of the gods are missing in this. Homer's world is a world where gods interfere constantly with the human affairs. Athena helps Odysseus. Poseidon hates him. Zeus governs the larger order. The gods are not background decoration. They are part of the machinery of this story. And again, I understand why Christopher Nolan wants the story to feel real, physical, psychological, human. But some things happen when, you take the gods out of this story. There's just not the Odyssey anymore. It's not Odysseus dealing with this higher power. We need the gods in there. It's integral to the story. This is no longer the Odyssey. This is just another playful movie that Nolan's put together. It's taken a 180 from the book. And this, the story changes from man versus God to man versus himself. That's not what the Odyssey is. Athena becomes less of a goddess and more of a psychological or symbolic presence. Poseidon becomes less of an active divine force and more of a consequence. And the supernatural world starts feeling like something we're interpreting, rather than something that the characters actually inhabit. That may make the movie more accessible to the modern audience, but it is also making it less authentic. And Homer is far more authentic if we kept to that script. As beautiful and as strange as the gods can be in these stories, without them, you no longer have the Odyssey. You don't have Odysseus communicating with this other force. It's no longer a remake of the Odyssey. What about the moral problem? This brings us to what may be one of the most interesting criticism Emily Wilson makes. What does the movie actually believe about violence? Because Homer is not exactly telling us that war is wonderful. Odysseus is a hero, but he is also responsible for a great amount of suffering, enormous suffering. The Trojan War destroys lives. His journey from home destroys more. Because remember, he left Troy after 10 years of battle to start making his way back to his beloved wife, Penelope. And in those travels, he runs a blazing trail of destruction as well. He massacres his suitors at the end. Now, Homer presents that violence within a very different moral framework from ours. But the violence is still there. And that's important, because if you make Odysseus into a modern, traumatized warrior, you have to decide what you're saying about the violence that created the trauma. Is war something that makes heroes or destroys them? Is Odysseus a victim of violence, or is he also one of its perpetrators? Can we sympathize with him without excusing him? And I think Nolan occasionally struggles to answer these questions. The film wants us to understand Odysseus, but understanding a character isn't the same thing as judging him. And Homer is remarkably comfortable allowing Odysseus to remain morally uncomfortable. Nolan sometimes seems more interested in making us feel sorry for him. And that makes the character easier to understand, I guess, but perhaps less complicated. Now, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we need to throw the whole kitchen sink at Odysseus. You know, any of these epics that we've seen in the past have often had authenticity to the 100%. And that's what's lacking here. Nolan has actually created a new Odyssey. And that's fine if you want to go with this. Unfortunately, I'm not keen on a lot of the aspects. Again, it's a good movie. It's fine in its context. But if you double down on some of the aspects, and I can understand some of the criticisms now. The pettiness of the, who the actors are and stuff like that, in terms of their color or their gender, that I can put up with that. But it's the sheer aspect of the guts of this movie not being the guts of the original Odysseus or Odyssey. Now, so what does Nolan do get right? He's obviously going to get some stuff right. He has visual IMAX, the ocean scenes are great, the ship. Now having said that, we got to be fair. We got to be fair with him, right? He's done something extraordinary. Hollywood doesn't do these kind of movies again. They do it in a limited fashion. Again, they're not epic to the degree of like a Gone with the Wind or Lawrence of Arabia, or just these are not. This is not to that level, and it could have been, and it should have been actually. This should have been something that was part of the 100 best movies of our existence as humans, but it's not. It's definitely not. Nolan does take. He's taken the ancient poem, a poem that can be, seem intimidating for sure, a poem written nearly 3,000 years ago, and he turned it into, a cinematic event for this year, for sure, 100%. It's not an easy task to dissect Odysseus and the Odyssey, and I'll cut him some slack, and maybe he wanted to simplify it for that reason, and that's fine. But don't tell me this is the original Odyssey. It's a different version. And that matters in terms of simplification. And visually, there's no question it's great. Nolan understands definitely scale. He understands spectacle. He understands the meaning of the audience. He understands what they want in terms of this style of filming, right? Where it's big. And that's exactly what an epic should do. It should provide that sort of, you're holding your breath kind of situation in the movie theater, where you're seeing this sort of crazy scene on the screen that, wow, could I ever survive that? That you're putting yourself in their shoes, right? There are moments in the Odyssey where the sea and the ships and the armies and the landscape create a scene of scale that simply cannot be reproduced by reading a page. That's for sure. I mean, it's going to be a different feeling. Now, I like the image that the book has created in my mind. I go with that more. I do like what he's produced. It's pretty neat. And Nolan has, also deserves credit for making people want to go back to Homer, as I said at the beginning. If anything, that's great that somebody's going to pick up a book. Beautiful. That's what we want. We want people to read more. And it's important that we read the authentic versions. And then if there's a comparative, go ahead. Do an analysis of the two different versions. That's fair. But to devoid or lose the other one and keep this one only as the mantle of the authentic is wrong. And so, if someone walks out of the movie theater and thinks, I want to read the book, then the movie's done its job. Okay, it's valuable. And there's another thing that Nolan gets right. The story within a story structure. Homer's Odysseus isn't simply a straight line. It moves back and forth, forward through memories, stories, songs, recollections, characters telling stories about the characters. Nolan is very comfortable with that kind of structure. And so, ironically, one of the most modern filmmakers working today may actually be particularly suited to adapt an ancient storyteller version to his movies. One thing I wanted to add here is the music is beautiful. He's done a phenomenal job with the music. Give him huge credit. I probably get the soundtrack once it's out. It's very, very nice what he's done. The authenticness of it, stunning. And again, the visual, stunning. You can't take any of that away. And I don't care what critics say, it's just stunning. So let me just, give you a few things that maybe were unnecessary changes. So Helena Troy, this one took a big shot. We have a person of color playing the role, and she's fine, but it's not historical to fact. And so why change it? What's the point of changing that? It doesn't make any sense. Now, unless, he's holding, and the poor actor is holding the backlash bag on Nolan's DEI 30% to get a nomination for award. Because that's what you need to have, 30% in the movie now to get put on some of these award programs, which is ludicrous to me. And again, maybe that was altering his intentions in terms of the creativity. I don't know. And for the amount of time she's in the movie, who cares? I mean, she's only in there for like 45 seconds, a minute, I don't know. And it's crazy online with the criticism about this. Who cares about that part? Why was there no Greek actors in this? It's a movie about Greece's legendary person. The dawn of Greece. The just aspects that require a Greek person at the helm. All with many of the different characters. They should have been Greek. I don't know. That to me is astonishing. I mean, it's astonishing if, Nolan is simply self-absorbed and out of touch with historical culture. I don't know. Let's say we're doing a movie about Martin Luther King, and then all of the supporters around him were actors of white, color, or other nationalities. Wouldn't that seem strange? But here we are, putting a variety of nationalities and cultures and everybody else under the sun. Again, super, let's give him an acting job, but not this one. Because you can see through the intent. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth. Let's just keep it authentic, people. So, and I know I'm going to take some criticism with this. Oh, who cares? I agree. This is sort of the minor stuff of the movie. And again, that whole aspect of nobody being in there, that was a huge miss on Nolan's part. They took that whole aspect of the Cyclops scene out. He needed to showcase Penelope more, as I said in my previous comments. And again, this is a Hollywood director, and he's probably taking pride in ensuring some authenticity, but the grievances are there. A lot of people don't like everything he's produced here. And again, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a good movie, not a great movie, but well worth seeing for sure. So, the big question, so where does that leave us here? I don't think Christopher Nolan has made a bad movie, as I said. It's good. Maybe, again, like I said, not a great movie, but I'm less convinced that he has made a great adaptation of Homer. And perhaps that's because the film is caught between two identities. It wants to be Homer's Odysseus, but it also wants to be Christopher Nolan's Odysseus. And those are not necessarily the same thing. Homer gives us a man who survives through intelligence. Nolan gives us a man who survives through endurance, trickstery. Nolan gives us a warrior haunted by his past. Homer gives us complicated marriage between two intellectual people. Nolan gives us a powerful love story, which is fine, but it leaves Penelope on the sidelines. Homer gives us gods who are actually interfering with human activity and messing up Odysseus. Nolan gives us more psychological world in terms of looking at Odysseus. And more of these choices are automatically wrong. That's the freedom of adaptation, though. You don't have to reproduce Homer for word. In fact, you couldn't. The question is, what can you have changed without losing the identity of the original? That's where I think Nolan comes closest to the line. So, my final thoughts, again, perhaps not the greatest irony is that Christopher Nolan was inspired by Emily Wilson's description of Odysseus, a complicated man, but Wilson's criticism is that the movie may have simplified him. And I think that's worth thinking about. Because Odysseus isn't interesting because he's a great warrior. There's plenty of great warriors out there in mythology. He's great because he's unpredictable. He lies, he cheats, he loves, he betrays, he regrets, he's arrogant, he's clever. Because sometimes he makes the right decision, and sometimes his pride gets people killed. That's the man Homer gave us. And perhaps the greatest challenge of adapting the Odyssey isn't making the Cyclops look enormous, or the ship look spectacular, or the battle scenes look epic. Perhaps the real challenge is putting a complicated human being in the center of a spectacle. And that's where I'm left with a strange conclusion. Christopher Nolan may have made a great Nolan movie, but I'm still waiting for that great Odysseus. And maybe that's okay, because if this movie sent back people to read Homer, I'm good with that. And if they want to pick up Emily Wilson's translation, kudos. Or Robert Fagel's, or any other version of this poem, it's well worth doing. And by discovering them, you'll discover yourself in many of the characters that they present in their adaptations, especially the character of Odysseus. You'll see this complicated man. It's definitely worth picking up for the next read. So, I'll leave you with that. Again, I don't want to say this is a bad movie. It's fine, it's okay, it's definitely worth seeing. 100% you should pick up the book and read it if you've never read it. It's a magical book. 3,000 years old, never get old. So I'll leave you with that. Again, if you can subscribe down below, I'd really appreciate it. Please comment down below as well. I appreciate that. And I hope to see you in the next video. I hope to have something out very shortly. Thank you. See you in the next video.